You're listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. Out of the Box is sponsored by hugmetees.com. Hugmetees.com, spread love, give a hug. If you like us, go on Stitcher or iTunes and leave a comment or subscribe. It helps us out a lot. I'm here today with Bobbie Oliver, comedy teacher, comedian, feminist, and author of the book, The Tao of Comedy. Bobbie, how are you doing today?
Yay. We're sponsored by Hugs.
We are sponsored by hugmetees.com. It is a website that promotes being positive and giving love and spreading positive energy.
Oh, that's so cool. I feel like we should light some incense.
We should. We need to light incense and meditate and be positive. So yeah, if you guys want to check out hugmetees.com and buy a t-shirt, 10% of the proceeds go to Best Friends Animal Shelter.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, I'm a huge dog lover. Bobbie got attacked by my puppies when she came in.
Oh, they're great. They're like mine. They're insane for like 5 minutes and then they're just over you.
Yeah, that's how my dogs are. So they've scared off some guests, I think.
They scare off the right people.
So I am so excited to have you here because not only are you one of my favorite comedians and friends, but also you're a feminist, which is kind of crazy in the comedy world.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it? There aren't very many of us.
Well, it's sad because, you know, I'm a feminist and a lot of people think that to be a feminist, you have to be, there's a stereotype of, you know, being like a lesbian or very manly or masculine. And you are just like Mother Earth to me.
Or hating men.
Or hating men.
Yeah, like to be pro-woman means to be anti-men. I love men. I've loved as many men in my life.
You've loved a lot of men.
As I possibly could. I plan to love more. Yeah, and so people just have like a totally different idea of what feminism is than what it really is. And I think that's due to people like Rush Limbaugh coining the word feminazi, and Bill O'Reilly and people like that who are very against feminism. And it just kind of spread that kind of negative attitude toward feminism just kind of permeated the culture. But actually, the Dalai Lama has identified himself as a feminist. Obama has said that he's a feminist. So my husband is a feminist.
It's kind of crazy that there's this stereotype out there that you have to be, it's kind of like stand-up. People say that there's a stereotype as a woman, you have to be gay or you have to be very manly and you can't be feminine and be funny. And you are one of the funniest people I've ever met. You guys can check her out online, Google her, watch her videos. You're in here, you know, you're beautiful, you're feminine, you're dressed girly, you have makeup on. There's nothing masculine about you. And yet I think you're funny. And you get laughs. I've seen you get laughs by men and women.
Well, I think the idea is that people tend to take a movement and they generalize and think that everyone in that movement feels the same way and does the same things and acts the same way. And just like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, you're going to have people
different
within
layers
that who feel different ways. I mean, even though the Democratic platform is pro-choice, you have Democrats in the party who are pro-life. So you have feminists who are lesbians, and you have some who are straight, and you have feminists who are very anti-porn, and you have what's called sex-positive feminists like me, who are very pro-sex and you know, pro-porn. So, you know, there are lots of
I'm
different
a pro-sex
kinds.
Feminist.
Yeah.
Yay!
We're just some horny bitches. So it's just a matter of, you know, there are individuals in the group, but we all, even though we have this kind of infighting, which is a little more public than I wish it, you know, than I wish it were. But even though we have this infighting, we try to stick to the same goals and ideas, which is equality for all. It's not women above men. That's never been a goal in feminism ever. It's not to diminish men. It's to be equal rights for everyone. And women, feminists have always been on the front line of the civil rights movement. You know, feminism began with the abolitionists. In the second wave in Gloria Steinem's day, they were out there fighting for equal rights. For everyone. And so it's not just about women, but our primary focus is women's issues. Like as if we were a journalist, our beat is women's issues. So I try to, when I see articles that are about women's issues or violence against women or something like that, I like to share those on my Twitter and Facebook, and I like to write jokes about that kind of thing so that I can use my platform to talk about things that are important to me. And I think every comedian does that, whether they call themselves a whateverist or not.
The thing I don't like, though, is that the labeling. It seems like society really likes to label people. Like I just tweeted about this because it just drove me crazy. You know, I actually counted because I had someone come up to me after the show and they go, "Oh, your humor is really, really ethnic." And I sat down and I said, "You know what? Is it really ethnic?" And I sat down and I went through my set list, and I think I have 3 or 4 bits. They're not just jokes. They are full bits that are ethnic bits. And then I started watching and paying attention to other comedians, male, female, white, black, whatever. And the percentage of my entire act, my headlining act, that's 45 minutes, that was ethnic was actually very small compared to other people. But because I'm an Asian woman or whatever, people were like, well, your act is, and I've had that before, people say your act is really ethnic. I'm like, I also talk about being married. That's a huge chunk of my material. I talk about dating. That's my dating, relationship, and marriage material is probably 80% of my material. Yet people are saying I'm ethnic. Do you get that? I mean, you're a white woman. Do people say, oh, well, you're a feminist, or you do girl comedy? Do people say that?
Well, people only, what they're saying to you is, I can't see past your ethnicity. That's what they're saying to you, and they're saying you're really ethnic. So when you do jokes about being married, they see it as an Asian married woman, right? When you do jokes about what your career, it's like, oh, an Asian woman in her career. So as I actually have a good friend who I respect a lot who listened to my first CD, which was an hour long, and it had about 5 minutes. If it was 10 minutes, I'd be surprised, but let's say 10 minutes, just to be fair, of feminist material, what you would call quote unquote feminist material, in an hour. And he said that the CD had a thread of angry feminism running through it.
Are you an angry feminist, Bobbie?
Well, you know what? Aren't we? First of all, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention.
I agree with that so much, and it's not just feminism; it's what's going on in everyday life with the corruption in government and politics, in world affairs, and I agree with you completely with that. I agree with you completely.
I mean, we're all supposed to just be complacent and feel okay about everything. What's the point in putting ourselves through this to get an opportunity to have a platform, if not to talk about things that really move us?
But why is it angry feminist? Why isn't it passionate? Why isn't it?
Or why isn't it even labeled necessarily feminist material for me to just be talking about maybe women's issues or women and men, but him hearing it in a way that was different than he was used to hearing it? It was perceived as anti-male, but what I did, and what every comic does, is I took my personal experience that an actual person said to me and did jokes about that actual person and what they actually said. And I think that's what everyone does. And you make jokes about who you mate and who you date.
And what happens to you? You make joke about what's real
women,
to you.
Right. Straight men make jokes about women. Gay men make jokes about gay men. You when you're in relationships with people and you're involved with people and you're treated by society a certain way because you're this, that, or the other, those are the kinds of things you're going to, to write about, at least in a portion of your act.
I don't get the labeling. It bugs me, and I guess it's something that I need to learn to deal with because it's going to happen. But it's like the labels. It's like, really? Were you paying attention at all during my set?
Well, I just feel like it's the death throes of the white patriarchy. The standard archetype of what power looks like in this country, in this world, is changing, and a lot of the people who have power are really not happy about the fact that they're losing power, and it's your fault, and it's my fault, and it's immigrants' fault, and it's women who can't buy their own birth control's fault. Or
I think that comedy writing is like the last stronghold in a way, because for white male dominance, because in a way, if you look at the statistics, women are statistically out educating men, out performing. I mean, we're not making dollar for dollar, but as far as income inequality, more women are getting higher paying jobs, and also, minorities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I just heard this story where they were discussing comedy writing in general, not just Hollywood writing, which is predominantly white male, but comedy writing, which is like something like 98% dominated by white males, not just males, white males.
And it shows. It shows. I say, those when you were a kid, those little boys that had the fort and they had a sign out front that said "No girls allowed." Yeah. They produce comedy now.
But I think that it's kind of a myth that's being perpetuated by these comedy writers as well, because they're holding on to their jobs for dear life.
Yeah, of course they are. Isn't everyone? But why not make room for some diversity? Like I really like the show Midnight, and they're great about booking female comics. But when W. Kamau Bell was on there, he called them out for having an all-white staff. Mm-hmm. So there's room for diversity. W. Kamau Bell, another person who identifies himself as a feminist.
So that I want to talk about your book a little bit, The Tao of Comedy. You just released it this year. It was your first, last year, right?
Yes, the end of last year.
End of last year. And it was your first book. Congratulations.
Yes, and my last book.
Why do you say that?
You ever hear me say I'm going to write another book again? Just slap the hell out of me. Because it was, oh my God, it was so much of my life for 4 years. All I did when I wasn't working
was right.
And then if I didn't write, I felt guilty. And it was such a process of putting it together. And it's a deep book. It's not just about comedy. It's a deep book, people. It's not just about comedy. It's about using Zen Buddhism and Taoism to find your authentic voice. Mm-hmm. And to just become a purer, happier artist, and to look at life, in a different way that not everyone else has already done to death on stage. So I put a lot into it, and now that it's done, I feel like, okay, I'm out of prison. Now you've got the book, people. Just read the book and leave.
So do you kind of feel like it's your life's work in a way?
I do. It is a culmination of because I've been doing comedy for 25 years. I've had the workshop for 10 years. We've had our own studio for a year. And it just feels like it's all just been leading up to this. And it's all just been... and by the way, I feel like I wanted the first words of the book to be, I'm a fraud. and when I teach and when I talk to people, I want to wear a button that says fraud on it so that you don't, confuse this as, these are just my experiences and my, and whatnot. But... it's all been leading up to this, and I feel like, you think when you've been doing comedy a year or two or 5 years or whatever, you know it all, you got it all, you got your act together or whatever, and that you couldn't possibly learn any more layers of it. I've been doing it now. Next month will be my 26th year. I've discovered layers of it over the last year. And layers of myself. So, I feel like it's all been kind of leading up to just sharing everything that I've experienced. And, people can do with it what they will. And if it helps them, which a lot of people have said it's helped them, then that's awesome.
Well, I mean, I think you're always going to be learning and growing. If not, you're not a very good comedian. Patton Oswalt scrapped his entire act and started from scratch after doing stand-up for years. And said, hey, this isn't authentically me.
Right. And Patton Oswalt just recently changed his opinion on rape jokes and wrote the piece about how he had come to realize, what the issue was with rape jokes and why he's now, quote unquote, against rape jokes. Louis C.K. has evolved to the point when the whole situation with Tosh happened and he had tweeted Tosh and people mistook it for supporting what Tosh had said. Then he went on, on the late night shows and said, I've come to see a different side of things. The women in my life have come to show me what their life is like. I've had a glimpse into what their life is like. And ever since then, he's been writing a lot more pro-women material. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of Louis C.K.'s acts lately, you could call feminist. Mm-hmm. So you want to grow and change, and when you get new information, you want to process that information and let it affect you, and then therefore your act.
It's so true. You see a comedian, and including myself. I mean, I've been doing stand-up for, I don't even want to say on the podcast, not as long as you, but a long time. And you're 3 years in, and you think, oh, I got half an hour, I got an hour. And you just want to go and tell that person, not to be negative, but you just want to go and tell that person or the old you, shut up.
Yeah.
That's not half an hour. That's nothing.
You just want to say, you don't know what you don't know. But it's a process and it's a path. And so many people, part of why I wrote the book is that so many people want to escape the path and the process, and they want it to be about the result. And
they want a headline after 5 years and look at me, I'm doing this and it does not work. I know headliners who have gotten on TV shows and skipped the quote unquote process, and it bites them in the rear hard.
Yeah, because the process is getting the hard knocks so that you get the chops to to perform, the skills to be able to handle yourself in situations. And if you don't go through that process and you don't get those skills, you don't know much when you finally get there. But what is getting there? I mean, what is making it? I feel like comedy is seen as like a marketing scheme to get rich and famous, It's like a stepping stone, a means to an end, and it's not, to me, comedy is everything. So I'm not trying to get anywhere. To me, success is breathing, waking up every day, and I'm still a comedian, and I'm still, paying my bills, and I'm still out there, and I'm still having something relevant to say every day. So whether it lands me on the Tonight Show or not, it can't be about that. Because if that's all it's about,
you'll go crazy. Because Hollywood is crazy.
And you'll wake up one day and realize you missed the whole thing.
You missed the whole process.
Yeah, you missed what it was about. It wasn't about the Tonight Show. It was about the process. It was about those moments day to day.
And you know what? The Tonight Show means nothing. How many comics have that have done the Tonight Show, who have done the Late Late Show, who said, oh, I thought my life was going to change after this. I thought my comedy career was going to take it to the next level. And the next day they're at the open mic with you, sitting next to you.
Well, they should be, always working on material. But yeah, totally. Or like, they've done a spot on Conan. They still have 1,000 followers on Twitter. So you can't parlay a spot on Conan into at least Twitter followers, for God's sake. So
well, those sets are so censored anyway. I mean, I know Eliza Schlesinger did her half-hour special, and she said they kind of butchered it. She goes, Comedy Central kind of butchered it. They cut out a lot of I don't want to speak for her, but she told me that she said they kind of cut out some of my punchlines.
Well, I'm a big critic of Comedy Central. I feel like Comedy Central is so white and male. Like, I can't tell if I'm watching that or American History X. But lately, they've got two things going on that's really awesome, because they never give enough of those half-hour specials to women. But they've got a couple things going on, which I'm really happy about. The Amy Schumer show is awesome. And the first season, there was this kind of underlying current of feminism in it, even though she was like outwardly being like, hey, I can burp and fart and talk about sex just like the guys. But there was this underlying current. But this year, it's like, bam. It's like in your face, and it's awesome. And also Broad City.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard of it.
Oh my God, it's so great. It is so great. So, and hopefully that proves that.
And Amy's show was the #1 show.
Oh, was it good?
I think it was the #1 show. Yeah.
Because really, it's all they care about is ratings and money. But I think, because their demographic, like as far as advertising, is like the 18 to 34-year-old, I think they just decide what they think 18 to 34-year-olds would like.
Do you know how many guys have told me, young guys, that they kind of were turned on by like hot, funny women, and it just, God. It's like insane.
Yeah, I want to say to Comedy Central, you would be surprised.
Comedy Central has no idea what they're doing, and their market research people, I'm sorry, need to talk to me, because I have had so many guys be like, you know what, it is so hot. And I don't know if it's because, the newer men are growing up in an internet generation where they're having more access to information and it's not so dominated by the mainstream. But let me tell you this. My dad grew up in the 50s in a third world country, and he actually said this to me. He said, I'm surprised men laugh at you when you're talking, because my dad grew up in a time where women didn't speak.
Did you say, I'm surprised people don't laugh at you when you're talking?
I'm surprised my dad hasn't been punched in the face. He's a character. I love you, Dad, but I'm surprised he hasn't been punched in the face by someone, because he just says stuff, and I'm like, Dad, you can't say stuff like that. My dad, I think, still uses the word Oriental. I'm like, Dad, do you realize you're oppressing yourself? I think my dad still uses the word Oriental. So he's like clueless, right? So my dad grew up in that time and place, and he just has this idea. He's 73, 74 years old. He just has certain ideas in his head that just are completely irrelevant. But I think that the men that are growing up today saw a different version of things. The 60s happened, the 70s happened, the internet's here. this and that. They're, so used to seeing that they think it's hot. It's hot to them. It's a turn on. It's different.
No longer a stigma.
It's not a stigma
to be funny anymore. And it's no longer that you have to look a certain way or act a certain way or not, or be or not be or something. And I'm so sick of this whole discussion and whether or not female comedians are pretty and this one can be pretty and that one can't be pretty. Nobody ever talks about that with men. Nobody ever. Where's the hot guys of comedy calendar? You know what I mean? I mean, not because there aren't 12. That's why. But it's so completely irrelevant. But it's these kind of discussions that we have, like white people don't see themselves as ethnic. So when they're talking about their experience or whatever, they don't see it as a white experience. But you're automatically ethnic because you're Asian. So everything you talk about on stage is through the lens of ethnicity.
My 4 bits that are ethnic out of my 70 bits.
Right. Like I do so much stuff about things that have nothing to do with feminism and men and so much of my act. You could come to see me so many times and not even know that I'm a feminist, depending on what material I do that night. But it sticks out in people's, if it irritates a person for some reason, like it hits them a little too close to home, they notice it, or that's the only lens they can.
Or if someone gets offended, or if someone kind of, whatever.
I just made friends with this young guy who's like 30, because that's what I do. And he was following me on Twitter, and then he started coming to my shows and stuff. And he just keeps texting me arguments of why I'm not a feminist and why I should call myself something other than a feminist.
Arguments of why you're not a feminist?
Yes. He's like, you should call yourself an egalitarian or a peopleist or a humanist or and I'm like, I'm a feminist. He's like, but you're for equal rights of all people. I said, yes, I am. But my focus is women's issues. But he was like, that word is so loaded. I said, then get over it. Then don't call yourself a feminist. I'm not going to do like they did with the word literally and change the meaning of it because people were so dumb they kept using it wrong all the time. I'm not going to stop identifying myself as something that I deem as positive because you were confused about what it means.
And the positive or the negative connotation doesn't have anything to do with feminism itself. It's people's perception that they're projecting onto it.
Right. And yeah, there are,
because I have an extremely positive view of feminism,
but there are people in any movement who are really extreme and say and do very extreme things.
It's just like someone who's a good Christian compared to someone who's a right-wing fanatical, anti-gay, anti-whatever Christian. The good Christian who's, loving thy neighbor and et cetera, is like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, it says in the Bible, love thy neighbor. Of course I accept gays.
Right. So you can be a Christian and have the same, a different viewpoint on that than another Christian.
Yeah. And the same thing with, like you said, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, whatever, independents. Someone has one point of view that's not going to be the exact same point of view as someone else. Yet people hear the word feminism and they have this idea of a shaved head, you're wearing plaid and making out with another woman and you want to stab and cut a guy's, member off.
Yeah, you're going around braless with a t-shirt on that reads slut. You don't shave your armpits or whatever. But I think that's just, they want to marginalize us. They want to say that's why it's important for me to keep the name feminist, for you to see me and say, oh, she's a normal person who loves men and, just wants equal rights and she calls herself a feminist. Cool. So maybe I can think about that word a little differently now that I've seen someone who represents that, I don't know if you saw that feminist selfie thing they would do.
No.
Like all these feminists were taking a selfie to show a picture that this is what a feminist looks like. Mm-hmm. That was going around. And of course, it's all different people.
Well, what I don't like is there's also a backlash. And I noticed that there was a lot of women, female comics, who feel that they need to prove that they're not
a
man
feminist.
Haters or not whatever. So they kind of go the extreme. And I don't want to say Sarah Silverman because I don't know what her affiliation is, but they try to do the dark, rapey jokes, blah blah blah, to show, look, I'm cool, I'm one of the guys. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Right. If you pay close attention to Sarah Silverman's jokes, they don't blame the victim.
Well, I'm not saying Sarah Silverman. I'm saying Sarah Silverman-esque, where they try to be.
Saying what these girls miss is that she's doing a rape joke that is meant to make you think about rape, not meant to make fun of the rape.
The victim.
This girl came in the studio last Friday, and if she comes back, I'm going to have a talk with her. She did 3 rape jokes. I actually walked out when she did the first one, and I closed the door loudly because I couldn't handle it. Like, I didn't go through all this to open a studio to be triggered every time some, 12-year-old wants to go on stage and
be edgy
and make fun of right and be edgy. And you know what? I posted this right before I left. Why is it that if you call out a comedian on doing hack airplane jokes, then you have integrity. But if you call out a comic on doing hack rape jokes, then suddenly you're a free speech fascist. What is hacker right now than rape jokes? What is more overdone than rape jokes? And people always talk about, I don't want to be PC. You know what PC means? It means knowing your audience. It means knowing that you are sitting in front of, like, white people tell different jokes in the South in front of white people than they do in LA when there are other people around. I've seen it. And so, it's like knowing 1 in 4 women in your audience has been raped.
Well, more than that, that is just the amount that's being talked
that they
about.
know of because it's the most underreported.
I think it's half because I've been sexually assaulted twice, and both times, actually more than that.
I have three times.
Three times, maybe 3 times. I'm like, maybe 3 times. I can't even remember.
It depends on how you define it.
It's hard to remember because there's so many times. The first time I was sexually assaulted, I felt so helpless. I was 19 years old, and I felt so helpless to say anything about it. It was a male comedian who I will not name because I'm classy, but I do want to share my experience to help other women.
But hopefully you will come to the all girl open mic at Tao and tell everyone who it is and say, don't let this person walk.
Well,
he quit
comedy.
Because that's the purpose of that.
He has since quit stand-up comedy, but so he sexually accosted me, and I was 19 and I was so embarrassed and so like I didn't know what to do. So I went to the Comedy Store.
Right, you were assaulted and you were embarrassed.
I was insulted. So then I went
because of society. You should not have had to have that reaction as a victim.
Well, so let me tell you what happened. So then, I thought, well, I'm not going to report it. I'm not going to say anything because we have mutual friends and I don't want to cause problems, whatever. I was 19. And so I went to either the Comedy Store or an open mic that we went to together. And this classless a-hole actually had the nerve to go around and tell people that I was a slut or whatever, and we had slept together and this and that. So I got there and I was already embarrassed, hoping I wouldn't see him. 3 male comics came up to me like, oh, I heard you're, a big hoe and you slept with so-and-so. And I felt like I literally felt like somebody slapped me across the face by 2x4 because what was I supposed to say? Actually, no, he raped me. Like what?
Right.
So he kind of did it as a preemptive strike by telling everyone so that I would be even more embarrassed to say anything.
Exactly. And so that he would feel better about what he had done.
Yeah. So I went, to the mic or whatever, expecting just to do stand up and hoping I wouldn't see the guy. And then I had 3 or 4 guys come up to me and, I heard you this and that. And reverse cowgirl. And I'm like, reverse cow. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was thinking, what are you talking about? And looking in hindsight, I should have said, you know what? That's not what happened. He actually raped me and I should have pressed charges. And I've talked to a lawyer since because I've been sexually accosted several times, and it's so hard to prosecute unless you go to police that night that it happens and they take a semen sample and there's
and they don't even process half the rape kits that they have.
You have to go that day, that night, and half the time
even then
you don't even know what happened. You're like processing it, like, wait, did that happen? What's going on? What's because. And the second time I'm hypoglycemic. The second time it happened, the guy, it was a date rape. The guy told me we're going to dinner. He ended up not taking me to dinner. I'm hypoglycemic, so my blood sugar had crashed and I passed out. So it's like I was just like frozen.
Right. And so therefore no consent.
And
you didn't give
this
consent.
Is how you know, ladies. This is how you know if you're dealing with a rapist, because I've talked to some white males, not just comics. Even comics are not all slut backs. There's a lot of great guys, but and I've had guys. Well, how can you tell if she's drunk and this? How can you tell? If you're asking yourself, how can you tell?
Yes, you might be a rapist if. Do you know how you can tell? She says yes. Let's have sex, and she's coherent.
Well, what if she's into it but? If you're asking yourself, just don't do it.
There are no blurred lines, okay? It's yes or no. Even people who play like sex games and do the no, they talk about it in advance. They have a safe word. They work out what they will and will not do.
And if you don't, then you need to get a safe word as a guy to protect yourself if you're unsure.
Well, you shouldn't have to just you don't just have sex until you hear the stop rape. You don't have sex until you get a yes. Hey, let's go.
So I just think it's really, really important for people to know out there. And a lot of guys, they don't understand the issue. They're not... Guys, imagine if you were in prison and some dude pinned you down. I mean, just imagine that. Come on.
It's like men's biggest fear is to go to prison. And whenever you hear men talk about prison, do they talk about a loss of their freedom, not being able to wear their own clothes?
They talk about
crappy food,
being someone's bitch.
Right. Every time, right.
That's
right.
like the biggest
And what
fear.
they don't understand is, we're in prison. Women are in prison. Like this is the yard for us. Like we are as subject to being raped by and it's not just the idea that it's some guy in an alley with a knife.
It's not, because most of them are date rapes. They're friends.
You know.
It's who you know. It's a cousin, a friend, this and that. And
date rape and acquaintance rape, that just means that you were brutalized by someone you trusted.
Which is why most of them don't go reported, because women are like me are embarrassed, or they're a friend,
and
or
conflicted. And you know that the police aren't going to do anything. What's the point to be dragged out like the Steubenville girl when they finally were forced to do something about that because of Anonymous? They just drugged that poor girl through the mud. And oh my God, girls participated in doing that today. And this is harsh. I don't care. I see women who do that to other women. I see them as house slaves. I see them as Uncle Toms, because they are throwing women under the bus so that because the patriarchy's been good to them, and so they want to just keep in line. They're like Samuel L. Jackson in Django Unchained. They'll do whatever they can do to make sure they get to stay by Massa's side. But screw the rest of us.
You had a very good master with the Southern accent, the
Thank
Georgia
you.
accent.
I can resort into my Southern. Yeah, I get the same thing with people thinking I'm doing Southern material, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just talking about my crazy family. It just happened to have an accent. I mean,
I don't want to go too dark, but it's an issue that's important, and I want you guys to realize, men and women. Hey, join a support group, talk to someone. I know it's difficult. Sometimes you can't report the person because it's a family member or a friend or something. But I mean, at least heal yourself. Guys, please be respectful. I mean, it's not that hard. A lot of guys, please just jerk off, guys.
Well,
it's safer.
But it's about so much more.
It's safer. If you're unsure, just go home and jerk off. If if it's about power control, go to therapy, please.
But I think for most guys are, who rape, it's not about sex. It's about power. It's about they feel powerless in their situation and they want to have power over you. That's why whenever a woman speaks up on the internet and puts herself out there, she gets rape threats. Mm-hmm. This guy on Twitter said that women weren't funny, and I had this long debate with him, and I ended up blocking him on Twitter, and then he put this whole manifesto about me on Facebook. And
I gotta read that.
And then his friends, it was like at least 6 months ago, and then they got my phone number and my contact information and put it on Facebook and told people to go. Can I cuss or no?
Yeah.
Can I say?
Sure.
Okay. Tell people. Well, I wanted to say exactly what he said. Would it be funny if I mouthed something? She thought I said something different.
No, you can't say that, Bobbie.
But anyway, they put my contact information on the internet and told people to go find me and fuck me because I dared to speak up when he said women weren't funny.
So what did you actually say to him in response that this male was so emasculated?
Oh, it happened. There was a whole long line of stuff. He said that women weren't funny. He didn't actually come right out and say women aren't funny. He had it in a joke.
Did he? Was it,
no.
Was
I
it
just saw it. No, I just started it. I just saw it.
Are you an instigator?
It said this thing about some woman said, I don't even know what it said. It was calling some woman a whore, which I was fine with or whatever. Because it was like he was talking to a heckler, which is cool. But then he said something about women not being funny in it. And I wrote back and said, oh, really? Are Mexicans lazy and will black people rob you? So it went from there.
The only thing I like about the stereotype is its ability for me to surpass expectations. I have so many people who just underestimate me because I'm an Asian woman or Asian or XYZ. And I want to say Asian and woman because I know my friend Yoshi gets this a lot. And I know a lot of other Asian comedians, male and female, who get this. So I'm going to say Asian and female. But people just underestimate you so much that it's like when I open up with any funny line, it's like I have them because they're so expecting me to suck. And it's so sad, but it's like I've had that happen. I've had it happen in front of all black crowds too, because, you know, they just think, oh, who is this girl going up in front of an all black crowd? And their expectations are just so low of me in general. And so it sets the bar for me to like succeed in a way.
But isn't it sad that it's come to this?
It is sad, but it's so funny. And I have people come up to me, oh, I didn't think you would be funny, or oh, I thought, you know, I did a show in Lancaster, California, and it was a mixed crowd. And I had this older gentleman come up to me, and he said, I was so surprised you were funny because you just look so submissive and demure. And I was thinking in my mind,
to me, because I want to have sex with you.
And I was thinking in my mind that could only be based on 100% racism, stereotypes, and sexism, because he never interacted with me before the show. He never talked to me, because anyone that knows me, any single person knows me, knows I'm loud, obnoxious, and outgoing.
There's nothing about you that is submissive. So for him to just say that based on just, you know, eyeballing you, of course.
It was complete. He goes, you just look so submissive and petite and demure and quiet. And I was thinking, you know, I said,
because that's the kind of porn he watches.
I was like, okay, you know, I didn't want to get into a fight with this guy because he thought he was paying me a compliment. So I was like, oh, thanks, you know, whatever. Do you want to buy a t-shirt or not? Give me your money.
That's the difference between you. I didn't want to get in a fight with this guy because he thought he was paying me a compliment.
I think he honestly thought he was paying me a compliment. So
I know, but he needed to be informed that he was not paying you.
So it's like, okay, thanks, whatever. You know, I said, do you want to buy something? You know, if not, get away from me.
Get the fuck out.
But it's like no one would say that to a black guy. No one would go up to a black guy and say, you just look like a thief. What are the stereotypes about black people?
Yeah, you know why? Because they're afraid to.
You just look, and I'm not saying black people are thieves. I'm saying whatever the stereotype is about, well, you just look like a criminal.
Or a drug dealer.
And a drug addict and this and that. And I'm just so surprised that you were nice and pleasant and your material was...
Although some people do. Some people are dumb enough to say that. But I think the reason why these short little white dudes go on stage and make jokes about rape and women and, you know, Asian men's dicks is because they know even though that should be looked on the same line as going on stage and saying the N-word and doing all this other stuff.
Doing what the Kramer did.
They would do that if they weren't scared to. That's the thing. They don't think that an Asian guy or a woman is going to walk up to them and knock them the fuck out after the show. And they think that if they talk shit on black dudes, that they are, so they don't say that.
But you know what? I feel that there's a power to the... I do feel that there is a power to the underestimation. Like, I'll never forget it. To this day, I will always remember the show. It was the best show I ever did in my life. To this day, of 12 years of doing stand-up comedy, I was doing a bar gig. It was a gang infested bar, and I think the week after they quit doing stand-up there because someone was stabbed.
Thank God it was the week after.
Thank God it was the week after. And the lineup was all guys. I was the only woman. And the host was doing jokes about like women giving blowjobs and this and that, and they don't know how to do it. Whatever.
I love it that you whispered when you said that.
Who knows what he was saying. So he was doing jokes about that, and pretty much every comic on the show was doing misogynistic jokes. I don't know if it was because it was a gang bar or they thought that's what the crowd wanted to hear, because it was a rough bar and it was a blue collar bar.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's what people thought. But I kind of studied the audience, and I was watching. And I noticed that people weren't really laughing that much. And I noticed that there was a lot of women in the audience. Yeah, they were Tola chicks. They were gangbanger chicks, but they were women. So I went on stage, and the first thing I did was empower all the women and get them on my side. And because they kind of loosened up, because women control the audience. I don't know if you know this, male comedians out there. Women control the audience.
Boys control open mics. Women control
the audience. So I got the women on my side, and then I noticed the men started laughing, because what happened was that the women weren't having a good time because the jokes were so misogynistic.
Yeah.
So the men weren't laughing, even though these were gangbangers. Pussy controls all.
They want to get laid again.
They want to get laid. And so the women weren't laughing. So I got the women on my side. And so then I got the men on my side. And I started doing really pro-female material. Not in an angry feminist way. Just like talking about more women's issues. And so the women were laughing. So after the show...
Well, you were doing it in a feminist way.
I was doing it, but not in an angry... I wasn't doing it in an angry feminist way. So then there was like 3 or 4, 5... I don't know. It was a long lineup of men that went after me, and no one could reach the height that I reached because they were doing these misogynistic jokes. And by nature of subconsciously accepting my material, the crowd could not accept the other material.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And so, because it's like I did the show in Compton, and I did a joke about, and I have this whole bit about how Asian women are not submissive, and it's a stereotype, and the only reason men think Asian women are submissive is because they're watching too much porn, and I do this whole thing, right? And then the guy after me was like, Asian women are submissive, you're just Americanized, and nobody laughed because people were like, dude, she just proved a point. You know, because I did this whole thing about, you know, you go to get your nails done and the Asian woman's yelling in your face. You go to the liquor store and the Korean woman's like loud and aggressive. I'm like, where are these submissive Asian women? You know? And so I do this.
Once they've accepted your premise.
Once they've accepted my reality, any other reality doesn't make sense because then it means that they're stupid as a crowd. Right? So the guy went on and he's like, well, you're just Americanized. You know, I've been to China and blah, blah, blah. And he started doing this horrible, hacky Chinese accent and talking about how Asian women do massage parlors and all this other crap. And the crowd literally started stiffening up, crossing their arms. I mean, they were ready to boo the guy because they had already accepted my reality of things.
Yeah, and it would have been like turning on you.
Yeah, and they really liked me.
Yeah,
you know, so they liked me, and they didn't want to turn on me because they were like, and it just seemed like he was attacking me the way he did it, even though he was trying to prove his misogynistic point.
Well, and you know, they talk about being PC, but it really was, you looked out in that crowd, you said there's a bunch of women, the men aren't having a good time because the women aren't having a good time, so you knew your audience. You know, and you know that you know, if you go on stage and you just alienate people.
Well, but most shows are people are going out with either groups or couples. I mean, half the crowd is women. Like, why are you going to sit there and say, you know, well, this bitch didn't know how to suck my dick or blah, 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 blah. And that's not even funny.
Well, I did this, I headlined this all black show, and I was the only woman and the only white person. There was one other white woman, and I brought her with me. Hannah Michaels, another feminist comedian. So I was like, why am I the headliner of this all black show? So I was nervous like you are before you go up. And then the guy in front of me went up and just did the most misogynistic material. Oh my God. It was so bad that by the time he was done, I was so mad. I couldn't wait to get on stage. So when I went up there, I was like, oh man, he just stole my bitch. I'm going to shove my dick down your throat bit. You know? And I just started making fun of him, and they loved it. They loved it that I stood up to him and that I was the only white woman in the room, but I still was like, no, I'm not going to let you, you know, try to intimidate me and hold me down. And they were like, hell yeah. But you know what you were saying about the expectations. I think it's great that you found a silver lining in people. You know, that you've been able to find some fruit.
It's a positive. It's a positive. But there are negatives.
But just the paradigm as a whole, you know, think about all the opportunities you've lost because of that idea of low expectations, that you're an Asian and you're a woman and you're this and you're that. And, you know. I
don't know if you get this. I don't want to cut you off, Bobbie, but I don't know if you get this. People tend to view my material as dirtier, even though it's not that dirty.
Yes.
Yes. My material, I've gone through my jokes. I have gone through my bits because I've had people say, oh my God, you're so filthy. I have gone through my bits. I have 2 bits that are really, really, really dirty. They're really dirty. I'll admit that. The rest of my material is like pretty clean. I talk about dating, but I never say fuck. I don't say this and that. I don't say
it. Honestly, it's because you're female. This guy was in I got in a fight with this guy in a bar who said, all female comedians ever talk about is sex. And male comedians never talk about sex. I'm like, have you ever been to a comedy show? Because 40% of male comics hump the stool. or use the microphone as their dick. But the thing is, because you're used to men being able to talk about sex openly in a public situation, and it's shocking when women do it, then just like the ethnicity lens or the feminist lens that people want to view.
Oh, I got a lot of lenses on me, Bobbie.
Right? Right? And so then they view you as dirty because nice girls aren't supposed to talk about things like that.
Which is crazy because it's 2014.
Certainly not nice, submissive Asian girls.
Does anyone have any bindings for my feet or, massage oil for my...
Don't you know your place, Rosie?
The funny thing is that the Asian stereotypes about women specifically, one, make no sense at all. They're complete opposites. It's like there's a stereotype that we're tiger moms and that we're also submissive. I'm like, those are opposites.
Right.
How can I be an aggressive, controlling tiger mom if I'm submissive? Hello. There's also a stereotype that Asian women are submissive and passive. And there's also a stereotype that we're, massage parlor, sexualized, prostitutes. I'm like, those are opposites. Like those, how can you
yes.
can't, what's going
on?
You're
innocent, but you're a sex expert.
And that comes out in my casting. The castings I go out for, I'm not kidding, valedictorian, nurse, prostitute. Those are the things that I get cast for and I go out for when my agent sends me out.
Well, I hope you get more nurses.
I hope so too. My parents would be proud.
Well, and that whole thing like dead hooker jokes is a big pet peeve of mine. Dead hooker jokes. Because don't you know these are women? Don't you know this is someone's daughter and mother and so, and sister. So if substitute the word woman every time you hear a dead hooker joke, and it sounds really harsh. It sounds a lot harsher. Oh, I've got a dead woman in my trunk.
Well, I don't mind if the joke is in some way used to shed light on something that's really negative. Like, have you seen Joan Rivers' A Piece of Work?
No.
I love Joan Rivers.
Oh, maybe I have. Is it that documentary?
It's a documentary on her, and in this, she gets heckled. She's doing a joke about, I think, special ed kids or something like that, and a guy heckles her. And in Joan Rivers' classic, classy style, she doesn't attack the heckler, which she could have easily done and got the crowd on her side. She said, you know what? It sounds like you're in a lot of pain, and the reason I make jokes about these things is to shed light on them so that people can feel better about their issues but she does it in a way where she doesn't bring the crowd down, but she's saying like, hey, anything that I make fun of, I'm doing it to bring light, to lift you up, to uplift you.
Well, I think it depends on the angle of the joke.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah,
but I'm saying the way that she handled it was like, and she wasn't doing the joke. And I can't remember the bit, but it wasn't making fun of special ed kids. She was just making a comparison or doing something. And someone in the audience said, screw you, my kid is special ed or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I think, you can use jokes to shine light on issues. There are rape jokes that shine light on issues. And I think, those are good jokes. Morgan Murphy has a new thing on her, I don't know if it's a video or a CD, but she says, her friend said, oh, if you weren't a comedian, you would just be the funny girl at parties. I mean, the funny girl at work. And she said, none of my male comedy friends would be the funny guy at work. She was like, human resources would be like, Bob sure does talk about rape a lot.
That's so true.
I mean, doesn't it kind of feel like some male comics are really obsessed with rape?
It seems, jokes? You know what? I think a lot of people use comedy as therapy, which is a good idea and a bad idea to some extent. If there's a punchline and it's not hurtful, I think that's fine. But some people just... you kind of get scared, like you're like, they're on stage and you're like, is this some kind of manifesto? Like, did you murder someone?
Because that's the thing. If the experience happened to you, like that girl who told those rape jokes the other night, when she comes back, I want to say, can I ask you a question? Have you ever been raped? Because if she was raped and she's using this as some way to remove all the power that has, then that's a different story. I'm going to leave the room every time she tells them because it triggers me. But that's a different story. But if somebody has not been raped and they just think, hi, what's wacky about rape? And especially if they victim blame, and somebody told me, oh, I feel like it's my job to show that anything can be funny. I don't need you to take my violent experience and shove it in my face when I go to a comedy club to prove to me that it can be funny. Why don't you talk about your experiences and your vulnerabilities?
Was she very, very young?
Yes, she was very, very young.
Yeah.
And clearly had never been to my place before. If she was, and I didn't know she had done 3 because I walked out after the first one.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it was just a one long bit.
No,
one long
she
bad
did them
bit.
at the end. She did 2 more at the end, he said. So, you know.
So let's hear a little bit about some of your Zen tips, because I have not finished the book, but I know that a lot of my listeners want to know some secrets from a Taoist master.
Fraud. Just fraud. Well, the book is called The Tao of Comedy, Embrace the Pause.
And I see you have a pause tattoo on your arm.
Oh, yes, I have a pause and a yin yang.
By the way, I've been saying Tao for so long, and I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I think that's the one in Vegas. They pronounce it with the T, but it's supposed to be with the D. But even though it's spelled with a T.
I had a guest on here who was a Taoist, and I think I said Taoist like a bunch of times, and he never corrected me.
That was very Taoist of him not to correct you. To just go with the flow.
He was being non-judgmental.
But the reason it's called Embrace the Pause is because it's not just about pausing on stage. That has a lot to do with it. Comedy is in the nothingness. And pauses are key to everything you're doing on stage, from your timing to allowing the audience to focus on what you want to focus on, them to focus on, to cueing the audience when you want them to participate in a certain way, to get the audience ready to hear a thing you're about to say. But also the pause refers to meditation and mindfulness and being in the present moment. Zen Buddhism, which is like the Japanese version of Taoism, they're kind of the same thing, which is why I refer to both of them, so that from whatever your experience is from. By the way, if you're a Christian, you can get A Course in Miracles, and it talks about the same stuff.
I love A Course in Miracles.
Oh, see? And it talks about the same stuff. So Zen Buddhism and Taoism are about having a direct experience with life and being in the present moment without the running dialogue of your brain thinking all the time. So rather than, like, I walked into a comedy club bathroom and the voice in my head said, "It's cold in here." Why did I need a narrator to tell me it's cold in here when I have skin? So
being in your experience and feeling the cold instead of analyzing it and being in your head.
Right. Because, well, for one thing, if you want to write a joke about it, everything's been said and done. I'm sorry. Everything idea you ever had, George Carlin already did 30 minutes on it. Okay? So
true.
How do you...
#true.
How do you write jokes about topics that all comedians are seeing and experiencing? And that is to be really present in the experience. So rather than being kind of where you barely see it, but you walk in, you see a tree, and when you look at the tree, you kind of get this Terminator screen that comes up in your brain, and you start seeing a list of all the different trees you've seen, and it pops up all these memories of trees you've been for, and then you're not actually looking at the tree in front of you. You're filtering the way you're experiencing the present through all of this stuff from your past, and you're not really actually looking at and seeing the thing. And so cultivating mindfulness and being present in the moment without the ego, without the voice running, so finding periods of unthinking, allows you to really experience an event and see nuances to it, to write jokes about it that nobody else can see because they're not even paying attention.
And also being 100% in the present moment, you perform differently than when you're in your head. I know that's an experience I've had where I'm really engaging with the audience. I'm being present. It's kind of like if you're performing stand-up comedy and someone's phone goes off and you ignore the phone because you're so set on doing your act, versus asking the person about the phone, being present, maybe talking to them, engaging them. And more comedy can be created in that present moment than if you were just analyzing about what's your next joke, because you're not addressing what's going on.
Right. You're actually riding the wave in front of you. You go out there, and because it's a live experience, anything can happen, and you can't just be on, phoning it in on autopilot that this is the way it's going to go down. You need those pauses to assess the audience. You need to be present in the moment to be able to handle whatever is coming up. And that comes a lot from experience, for sure, but also in cultivating those moments of silence and unthinking in your life. Mm-hmm. Yogi Berra talks a lot about this in coaching, that don't think, hit. you know. So, and this is, you know, in Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance, and Zen in the art of swords and swordmanship, Zen in the art of archery, all of that. It's like you can sweep the floor in a Zen way by being present in what you're doing. And so meditation is just like a tool to help you become present and to help you turn off that radio. See, we've over identified with the voice in our head, and we're supposed to utilize it when we need it, but it's just on all the time.
We're really attached as a society to our brains, and I just want everyone to know here that there's 4 different areas to being happy. There's physical happiness, mental, emotional, and also spiritual happiness. And spiritual happiness is very important. Even if you're atheist, even if you're agnostic, spiritual happiness is extremely important to being holistically happy. And this is what Bobbie's talking about, is many people focus on intellectual, mental happiness, maybe physical happiness, getting, you know, the right girlfriend or feeling a certain external feeling, or maybe getting into shape, which is a great way to be happy, to be physically fit or other things, but it's not a holistic, you're not taking care of your entire body. Spirituality, again, you can be spiritual and agnostic or atheist.
Well, and you're focused on your career in that way. Oh, this will make me happy if I achieve this and I get that and that. And you never stop. I've been feeling like the heart was missing from comedy for a while, like the spirituality part of it, the spiritual part of comedy. And that's what I want to infuse back into it. I mean, yeah, I'd like to de-hack comedy. That's part of my goal with this book. But I'd also like to help people just be happier about the process and not so focused on getting to where this idea. And the thing is, if you get to that carrot on the end of the stick, which you never do, but if you get to that carrot on the end of the stick, then you're not even happy with the carrot, because you're just focused on, well, what if I lose it? What if somebody tries to take it? I've got to make sure I get more carrots. And
it's so true. I know comedians who are multimillionaires, extremely successful, touring headliner acts, and you know, I've opened for some of them. Some of them are my good friends who, you know, were at my level and then exploded into superstardom, and they've all told me the same thing. It doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. Your mind doesn't stop. Always wants more. Your ego doesn't stop. It always wants more. So that's a really good point. It just changes
strategies. Instead of saying, you're a loser, you suck, you'll never amount to anything, you start to get successful, and it goes, oh, they're going to find out. Everyone's going to know that you're a fraud. You know, or if that strategy doesn't work, it switches it up to another strategy. It's like a man trying to have sex with you. You know, this one didn't work. Let me try this angle. What about this angle? What about this angle? Let me try, you know.
I want to address your teaching as well, because you're a great comedy teacher, very well renowned in the Los Angeles area, and I'm sure all over the place. And I have not studied from you, but I have taken comedy classes, and it was very helpful. And I hear this idea from certain comedians that you can't teach someone to be funny. You can't teach comedy. You know, comedy teachers are just trying to steal your money and all this and that. I studied with Adam Barnhart comedy writing at the Comedy Store. He was great. He was amazing. And I did find value in it. I eventually had to go just open mic it and learn the School of Hard Knocks. But I felt like it was very helpful. And I know a lot of people who have started through taking comedy classes, and it was very meaningful for them. What do you say to these people who are just, because I've heard a lot of naysayers about teaching comedy.
First of all, usually here's how the sentence goes. You can't teach comedy. You can't teach stand-up comedy. Oh shit, I got to meet my acting teacher before my improv class because I'm doing voiceover work tonight with my dialect coach. It's like, okay, but you can't teach comedy. Okay, a comedy class is not in lieu of open mics. It's not in lieu of shows. The 10,000 hour theorem states that in order to master something, you have to put 10,000 hours in it. So you need to do the work regardless of if you have a mentor, if you have someone to ask questions or someone to bounce ideas off or whatever. So regardless. But the idea that you can't, I mean, yes, you can't teach an inherently unfunny person to be funny. You just can't. You can't teach a person who just has zero acting ability to act. But you can teach people how to go from being like the funny person at parties to having a stage act. And you can teach people tricks and things that, or just like lessons you learned the hard way over years and years. You can share those with other people.
That is something I wish I had, because I learned so many lessons the hard way in Hollywood. I wish there was a Hollywood class that someone would have just said, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. You know, I had so much mixed advice, and half of it was just people being negative.
Or trying to they give you the advice because they want to scare you off or they want to make you dependent on them. But the main thing we do in my workshop, yes, it's very constructive feedback based on what you're doing. And we fix jokes and we come up with, hey, have you tried it like this? Or have you tried this word? Or blah, blah. But the main thing we do is to keep that focus of having the spiritual side of it, having the mindfulness and meditation, and approaching everything from that philosophy, and from the philosophy that you use your comedy for good and not evil.
That is great. That is so great.
That, yeah, you use your powers for good. And yes, free speech is great. Free speech is important. But with free speech comes responsibility. Just because you can say something
doesn't mean you should.
Doesn't mean you should. And just because you have a microphone doesn't mean you should say something. This guy said to me on Friday, he goes, "You want to hear a pickup line I heard the other day?" And of course I didn't say yes. He just said it. He said, "Hey, let's don't turn this rape into a murder."
Did he know who you were?
Yeah. He was at my mic. And the first thing I said is, "I will throw you over this balcony. And when I go down
there..."
You
said, don't turn this mic into a murder.
Right. I said, if I go down there and you're still alive, I'm going to smother you with something. And then later on, I said to him, you've been in the military. You were in Iraq. You know about PTSD. Why are you telling rape jokes to rape victims? You know me. What's your motivation? He was, it's just something I heard. I said, I've heard a lot of horrific shit too. And I don't go around saying them to people. You have to ask yourself, what is my motivation? He goes, well, I don't say that on stage. I said, well, first of all, 1 in 4 women in your audience has been raped. So know that at the minimum, if not 2 in 4. And if it's female comics, it's going to be higher.
If it's female comics, it's 8 out of 9.
Yeah, it's 4 out of 4. And then I said, but you said it to me and you know, well, it's just something. I said, you need to think about what your motivation is for saying something like that to someone who you know experienced that situation before.
Because sometimes it's subconscious.
But I think you check them on it. Just like when I was in the South, people hated me in the South because every time somebody said something racist, I checked them on it. Every time. My parents used to have an Aunt Jemima on their front door that said, wipe your feet, honey child. And every time I came over, I hid it in the bushes. Every time. And then I'd come back over the next time, it'd be on the door again. And nobody ever talked about what happened to Aunt Jemima, who dug it out of the bush, Every time. But now they don't have it anymore.
Oh my God, Bobbie, you're so funny. All right, we need to wrap up. How can people find you? How can they buy your book? How can they support you? By the way, guys, if you thought our conversation today was too feminist heavy, just know that Feminist put out we love men, and some of us have a chip on our shoulder and are willing to prove it more than others, but we love men. We're very pro men.
We do love men.
A lot of them, including myself, are very sexually free. So don't say, oh, she's a feminist. She's a, bush eating, whatever. No, we love men. Some of us are, love women as well. I love
some
both.
Feminists are men.
And some feminists are men.
Because I only let a man who respects me treat me like a dirty little slut.
So don't turn off the podcast. Support always. And as you know, I always love bringing people with diverse and interesting points of view. Bobbie, how can people find you online, on Twitter, support your books, support your classes?
Well, I am on BobbieOliver.net. And Bobbie is spelled Bobbie, because I'm a girl. And on Twitter, I'm at the Bobbie Oliver. My book is also linked to, and my workshops are all linked to from BobbieOliver.net. So you can find me that way. And I'm on Facebook at Bobbie Oliver.
And if you guys enjoyed us, don't forget to visit outoftheboxpodcast.com and click on the donate button. We're now accepting Bitcoins and Litecoins, so there's no reason not to donate. If you guys had a good time, send us a message on Stitcher and iTunes in the comment section. And don't forget to go to hugmetease.com and buy a t-shirt. Spread love, give a hug. hugmetease.com. This has been Out of the Box with Rosie Tran.